It is going. Okay, I think it's 10:16. Why don't we get rolling here this morning? I think I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan Wecker. Is that correct?
That is. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to
Good
jump.
morning.
My connection with Dr. Holmes is that I was born at George Washington University Hospital, and I won't say how many years ago that was. But anyway, I'm here to present the Bruce Gibbard Award. Dr. Bruce Gibbard was a valued colleague and mentor to many in our field. I feel fortunate to have known him and worked alongside him on behalf of our patients and our profession. In his memory and honor, the Vermont Psychiatric Association bestows the Bruce Gibbard MD Award for Clinical Excellence nearly every year upon one of our members who's demonstrated qualities exemplified by Bruce Gibbard with respect to clinical excellence, including loyalty to patients, commitment to privacy and confidentiality, and to the highest standards of ethical care, outstanding psychotherapist, valued diagnostician and or theoretician, also commitment to professionalism, including participation in the Vermont Psychiatric Association, the American Psychiatric Association, and other medical and professional organizations, and contributions to education and teaching. That said, it's my honor and privilege to announce that Dr. Lisa Catapano-Friedman is the 2023 recipient of the Gibbard Award. Lisa comes by her psychiatric bones honestly. Her father was a renowned member of our profession from New Jersey. She remembered him as a very even-tempered man, but also very much a fighter through the APA and the New Jersey Psychiatric Association, who fought for ethical issues and created ethics committees. Lisa's a graduate of Tufts University School of Medicine and divided her psychiatric residency between Boston University and the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey, Rutgers Medical School. She then practiced in her home state for several years, but in search of greener pastures, relocated to Bennington in 1991, where she has maintained a private practice in adult and adolescent psychiatry ever since. For the last 22 years, Lisa has been medical director of the Memory Clinic in Bennington, with a large diagnostic, treatment, and clinical research facility for patients with dementia. In that capacity, she's evaluated and treated many patients, in addition to participating in a wide range of research. Along the way, Lisa has become known as a font of wisdom and knowledge in geriatric psychiatry, has made herself generously available to consult informally, yet meaningfully, with colleagues across the country and beyond. For even longer, and on the other end of the age spectrum, she's been the consulting psychiatrist at the Vermont School for Girls, a residential therapeutic school for adolescent girls with serious mental illnesses. In addition, Lisa's been clinical professor at the Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences University since 2012. It was about that time that I first came to know Lisa well, when she became the Vermont Psychiatric Association's deputy representative to the American Psychiatric Association Assembly. I was our representative at the time, and she was thrilled, and I was thrilled to see that Lisa brought a passion for, as she puts it, fighting against all the stuff that gets between us and caring for our patients. She's continued ardently in this vein since succeeding me as Assembly Rep, and even more so now that she's concurrently president of the VPA. In the excellence of her clinical practice, her investment in both formal and informal psychiatric education research, and her commitment to the highest ethical standards for her work, Lisa Catapano-Friedman embodies the spirit of Bruce Gibbard. She richly deserves the award that bears his name. Please join me in congratulating her for achieving this honor. Thanks. And I'd now like to turn the camera over to Lisa for a few words. So, Lisa.
Wow. Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you to the committee that nominated me for this in the first place. When I was listening to you read off the list of qualities that the nominee was supposed to have, I'm thinking, that's me? Really? Whew. Okay. I mean, not only am I truly grateful and thankful for this, when I first heard about the Bruce Gibbard Award, I Googled it because I really didn't know what it was. And you get a little information about Bruce Gibbard if you've ever done this. But really what comes up are a lot of the names of the people who got this award previously. And when I looked at who they were, I thought, oh my God, these are amazing people. You know, these are incredible doctors. These are great with their patients. They're leaders in their field. They're incredibly compassionate people, generous with their time. And I'm like, whoa, okay, I am really honored, truly. As Jonathan said, I jokingly blame two people for getting me into this in the first place. One is my father and the other is Jonathan. But blame is really the wrong word. I'm really very grateful to them. As Jonathan said, my father was a psychiatrist in New Jersey, very active in the New Jersey Psychiatric Association and the APA. And I had, in a sense, the pleasure, since I was a very good touch typist as an adolescent, of being his secretary. So I was really in on a lot of the things he was fighting for. He was a very gentle, kind man, but he was an impassioned fighter about the things that mattered in terms of care of patients, whether they were ethical things or getting more young psychiatrists involved in these issues. And when I went into practice back in antediluvian times, when there were still dinosaurs and things like that, practice was easy and joyful. You were taking care of your patients. You weren't distracted by insurance companies and prior authorizations and productivity requirements from hospital systems, and the fact that now, sadly, scarily, that there are no psychiatric beds and people are in emergency rooms for weeks at a time, and emergency rooms are stressed and doctors are burning out. We didn't have any of that. And for a while, in a sense, life was good. It was joyous. And when, yes, I was a member of the New Jersey Psychiatric Association when I was practicing there, moved to Vermont, became a member of the Vermont Psychiatric Association. And then in 2013, I think it was Jonathan, he sort of enlisted me to be the other representative for Vermont to the APA Assembly. And that made it so clear to me, in a sense, what my father had been doing, which was here was an avenue to really fight for our patients, to try to fix what was wrong. And yes, wheels turn slowly when you're trying to fix what's wrong. But all of these issues, each of us has to fight for, but we cannot fight alone. And I really do think that on a local level, the VPA has been a very good advocate for our patients, and on the national level, so has the APA. My passion, and I try not to go into rants about the various issues, my passion as the current VPA president is to light a fire under everybody else, because we have got to, we need each other. And we need each other for our patients, and also to bring back the joy in what we do. I still find it joyous. I find it worth doing. I can't imagine not doing it. Even when I get older than the dinosaurs, which I may be getting close to, I don't know. But you know, I have to say, all of these things have been incredibly valuable to me. I am just hoping that I can continue to light fires under people, and also get more psychiatrists into Vermont so we can light more fires and get more people to fight for what our patients need. I just had to say thank you so much for this, and I really am incredibly honored. Yeah, I won't rant.
Okay. I believe I'm going to pop on just for a brief moment as we are transitioning to the Gibbard lecture part of the morning. And I'm just going to take this brief moment to recognize our committee chair, Jeannie Pinez, who is stepping down from the committee after a dedicated 16-year service as a committee member and 8 years as a committee chair. So Jeannie, we would— 13 as committee chair.
I was going to talk about that.
Sorry, I don't mean to steal your thunder. I just wanted to say from the committee to you that we will miss your presence and your devotion to this committee, truly. And we thank you for your genuine care in steering this ship for so long. So with that, I just hand the floor over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Sherry. It's been great to be on the committee with you. Wonderful. So I don't know if we want to leave a couple minutes for everybody to get in because it's a little before 10:30, or Julie,
I think so. I'd like to wait a couple minutes so people can join us. I don't want to miss the good intro business. So maybe everyone wants to run around, stretch your
Yeah.
legs for 4 minutes, and then we'll start at 10:30 with the intro for this morning's lecture.
Yeah,
All right.
thanks.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. And I'll just tell you that a couple of committee members couldn't be here today and we'll miss them, but we have Jerry and Logan with us today, who are great and Jerry's gonna moderate the morning session and Logan's gonna moderate the afternoon. And Jim Jacobson couldn't be with us and Mina Levinsky-Vold couldn't be with us today. So they're with us in spirit.
Dr. Holmes, did you switch to another computer or something, or is my computer doing weird things?
She's still here. She just turned her video off.
I know, and I see her video on in another position on the Brady Bunch squares. Do you see what I'm seeing,
Oh.
Logan? It
I'm
could
not
be
seeing-
me. Do you see that?
Can
Julia,
you, no, I dropped the connection somehow and came back on.
Okay, let me just,
So now am I on twice?
it is, but it might just be what my thing is doing. Let me make you make sure you're a host so your square gets highlighted the right way. I think we're okay.
Okay. So I missed a minute or so I don't know.
We're just going to wait a couple more minutes before we begin, and
I
Jeannie
see. Okay. All right.
will
Good.
start with the
Gotcha.
introduction.
So we can start on time, yeah.
Right.
Gotcha.
Let people get in.
Whoa. Okay.
Do you want to begin?
Yep. Take it away, Jean. Go ahead.
We have all our people. Yeah. So welcome to the 20th anniversary presentation of the Bruce Gibbard Memorial Lectureship. My name's Jean Piniads, and I'm the co-chair of this committee along with Jim Jacobson. Our committee, including Mina Levinsky-Vold, Jerry Apettisano, and Logan Haig, is thrilled to bring our speaker today to you. Her name is Dr. Dorothy Holmes, and we are so happy to have her. I'll introduce her in a moment and tell you more about how wonderful she is. First, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for attending, and for those of you who've supported the Gibbard Lectureship in various ways over the years since its inception. A special thanks goes out to Bob Peratini and Deborah Lopez for actually getting this lectureship off the ground years ago, and for the Psychiatry Department and Rob Altoff for continuing to provide a home for the lectureship. And I'd love to say thank you to Julie Dumas, the incredibly reliable and reliably incredible Julie. So thank you for all your support over the years.
You're
Please,
welcome.
please continue donating, attending, and supporting the lectureship in any way that you can. There's ways to donate that are described on the brochure. I have 3 announcements. One, there's a display in the Dana Medical Library describing this lectureship, and it includes some of Dr. Holmes' articles. If you're in that neighborhood, stop on by and take a look at her writing, her beautiful writing. Second, after 16 years on this committee and 13 years in either a co-chair or a chair position, as Jerry said, I'm stepping down. I've enjoyed all of it and this wonderful, hardworking committee. It's a great committee. And the committee is left to you in excellent hands with 2 new members, Judy Lewis, who used to be a member and is coming back on, and Alicia Senghas, and the current members as well, who are just fantastic. So thank you for the opportunity to have served in this role and to have honored such a lovely teacher and analyst and mentor in Bruce Gibbard. Third, I'd like to take a moment for all of us to honor the memory of Doug Betts, who passed away last week. He came to the psychiatry department in the 1970s when psychoanalysis was barely a glimmer in the eye of the department. He favored a Cahutian framework as he treated individuals and couples, and he knew Bruce Gibbard well and shared several stories with us about Bruce as we ate our 10th anniversary cake, if you remember, in the days before COVID, a decade ago when we were all together. We'll miss him very much in our psychoanalytic community. And now to Dr. Holmes. Dr. Dorothy Evans Holmes is a teaching, training, and supervising analyst in the Psychoanalytic Center of the Carolinas, professor and PsyD Program Director Emerita at the George Washington University, and teaching, training, and supervising analyst Emerita at the Washington Baltimore Center for Psychoanalysis. She's widely recognized for her examination of the impact of race and gender on the psychoanalytic treatment process. Her most recent award, I believe, in 2022, the prestigious Sigourney Award, was conferred for her landmark, groundbreaking work examining systemic racism in the role in and its role in psychoanalysis. In her award-winning paper called "I Do Not Have a Racist Bone in My Body," Dr. Holmes posited that rather than seeing race as an obstacle to deeper work, its acknowledgement can lead to more just practices in therapy and beyond by helping people claim all aspects of their identity. And she shows us how psychoanalysis as a field has the conceptual and clinical tools to go about this reclamation. She's written about neutrality not really being neutral, and a paper called "Our Country, 'Tis of We and Them: Psychoanalytic Perspectives on Our Fractured American Identity." And she's written about feminism and psychoanalysis. She's served on several editorial boards, including International Journal of Psychoanalysis, Journal of American Psychoanalytic Association, and now on the editorial board of Psychoanalytic Dialogues. Dr. Holmes continues as a National Psychoanalytic Organization leader and serves as the chair of the eponymous Holmes Commission on Racial Equality in American Psychoanalysis. She's also a member emerita of Black Psychoanalysts Speak. And if any of you get a chance to watch the original film, Black Psychoanalysts Speak, it's really quite wonderful. It's on YouTube. And there's now a series by that, but it's her comments on that in that movie are quite beautiful and really profound if you get a chance to hear her. There's also a lovely interview conducted by Dr. Usha Tumalanara with Dr. Holmes in the summer 22 issue of Division 39 Division Review. Gives some history, Dr. Holmes gives about herself. It's really lovely too. She is now in practice in psychoanalysis and psychotherapy and has been in Bluffton, South Carolina. And we'd like to give her a very warm welcome. Welcome, Dr. Holmes.
Thank you, and I certainly do feel welcome. And
Dr. Holmes, sorry, can I interrupt you? Your papers are in front of your camera, so we can't.
oh,
There, much better.
okay.
And one more question, would it be okay with you if I made you spotlighted? Is this okay for you? Does this mess with your, I've made you the front and center for all of us. Is that okay for your?
That's fine, whatever. You
Okay,
want
take
to
it
do.
away.
Okay. So within my newly adopted home, not so new, I've been in South Carolina since 2011 full time, but I'll use the way of greeting people in this town, which is good morning, all y'all. So I'm really happy to be here and pleased and honored that you would select me for this most prestigious lecture and to honor the memory and the good works of Dr. Gibbard. So my paper, the first part of it is entitled, Why the Axe Forgets What the Tree Remembers, Reflections on Racial Unknowing. And to start us off, to get us centered and in a positive, reflective space about such a difficult topic as systemic racism, I want to share a poem with you, and it's from Václav Havel. Everyone knows, I'm sure, who he was, a distinguished poet, playwright, and dissident who became the first president of the Czech Republic. And this is his poem on hope. Hope is a state of mind, not of the world. Hope in this deep and powerful sense is not the same as joy that things are going well, or willingness to invest in enterprises that are obviously heading for success, but rather an ability to work with something because it is good. It is hope above all that gives us strength to live and to continually try new things, even in conditions that seem as hopeless as ours do here and now. In the face of this absurdity, life is too precious a thing to permit its devaluation by living pointlessly, emptily, without meaning, without love, and finally, without hope. So again, esteemed colleagues, I thank you for inviting me to present on this special occasion to honor Dr. Gibbard. I hope my message on a very challenging subject will be illuminating, that it will help us all to see a clearer path on which to walk to effect positive change in our individual selves, in our work as mental health professionals, and in our larger social world. So let's get right to it. The title for this talk, Why the Axe Forgets What the Tree Remembers, is adapted from the West African Yoruba proverb, the axe forgets what the tree remembers. For purposes of this presentation, the axe references systemic racism and its perpetrators, and the tree references those who have been cut by the axe of systemic racism and who remember those cuts as they stand tall and remain full of resolve, even in the face of those cuts. I speak this morning from the perspective of a standing tree to offer a hypothesis about why the axe forgets, the nature of the forgetting, why it persists, and what we practicing psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, and other mental health professionals can do about it. This is a talk of storytelling from everyday life, historically and currently, from history of another discipline, namely religion, and with a bit of my brand of psychoanalytic formulation mixed in. First, a little personal and professional history to set the scene. In my mid-teens, I was first asked to do what I have been asked to do many times since, share with a group of well-meaning white folks about what it means to be Black, about the aspirations, travail, and accomplishment of Black folks, and that it has been hurtful, daunting, and discouraging for us to try to make it in the white world that affords people of color a place, meaning second place. I even made such an offering at my church, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Savannah, There, I offered a 2-year discussion group that met bi-monthly and that used art forms, movies, literature, music, to show the factors I just mentioned, the aspirations, travail, and accomplishments of Black folks. I've come to believe that these exercises have modest utility. They do not help the axe to remember or the axe wielders to stop wielding the axe. Frankly, as to my contributions on this kind of information campaign, I feel that I have accomplished little to stop systemic racism. I did experience the church discussion group as the best of such offerings. We even built our strength and commitment into an action plan to collaborate with local economic, educational, and cultural agencies to work towards empowerment and equality in underserved areas of Savannah. That plan faltered when it met the headwinds of the acute phase of my mourning after my husband Raymond's death, and then the rather sudden departure of our former minister. Still, I have fond memories of that group, including that in one of the final meetings when we considered the invaluable cultural contributions of Aretha Franklin's music, iconic music, I should say, Raymond and I had our last dance. Even with these warm memories, my impression is that such information campaigns that many of my family members, friends, and colleagues of color have engaged in over decades have not really made much of a dent in systemic racism. What would be more effective in light of my ongoing work to create racial equity within my chosen field, namely psychoanalysis? From my work on the Holmes Commission, what is more effective is collectives of white and Black folks working together in sustained discussions in which experiences of racism are shared by and among all participants, not just Black folks talking about what it means to be Black in a white world. That kind of discussion produces racial enactments inevitably, and when worked through, can have lasting impact on understanding systemic racism and on motivating folks to act to reduce it. A bit more on the limited value of white therapists thinking they can become culturally competent by learning about Blacks and other groups subject to oppression. For example, a long time ago, in 1984, I published a review of a book that was about helping therapists become more culturally competent by learning more about the different cultures of their patients. The first half of the reviewed book was about numerous ethnically and racially different groups, their histories, their cultural practices, and their habits. The second half of the book was composed of clinical examples purporting to show the increased cultural competency of therapists because of the knowledge they had gained from their immersion in the facts of the first half of the book. Well, guess what? There seemed to be very little impact from the increased intellectual awareness offered in the didactic section of the book, even though it would seem to have had the potential to help the practitioners become more empathically attuned. Specifically, there were multiple examples in the second half of the book, in the therapy vignettes, of arguably racist practices. For example, children of unwed mothers across these different cultural groups were routinely referred to as illegitimate. Elderly women of color were addressed by their first names, though the offered text in the first half of the book clearly indicated that the women's dignity and elder status in their communities warranted them being addressed by title, or that the more familiar greeting should have been negotiated, not just assumed. So what is systemic racism? Before proceeding, I think it is important to briefly offer a definition of systemic racism. It is a set of practices in a society and its governmental and other social and cultural institutions that deny access and opportunity for full advancement on the irrational basis of any aspect of one's identity, e.g. race, class, gender, sexual orientation, religion, or any other identity marker. The evidence of systemic racism may be subtle or gross, may be calculated or unintended. The axe is often oblivious, while the sap is oozing from the cut tree. I would like to offer you a personal example. And I ask you, take a few deep breaths, sit back, center yourselves. I ask you to place yourself in the situation I am going to describe. With which of the characters do you identify? As that character, what did you feel? What would you have done? So here it is. 5 years ago, in my adopted southern hometown, Bluffton, South Carolina, I went to a high-end beauty supply store. As I was about to enter the queue to pay for my purchases, I noticed a tote bag on display. It seemed perfect for my husband who collected totes. So I said to the store associate who had helped me that I would like to get that bag. She told me that I could not get that one because it had to stay on display, but that I could get one and that it would be, quote, free if I purchased my choice of a cologne for men. So at her direction, I got out of the queue and proceeded with her beyond the display to select a cologne. On our return to the cashier, I noticed another clerk and customer removing the displayed bag. When I approached them, I was told that the displayed bag was the last one. I asserted my claim to it, and the clerk helping me supported my claim. At that point, another person came over, announcing herself as the manager. The clerk helping me and I explained what had happened. The manager directed the other customer and clerk to take the bag and to proceed to a cashier. Note that I was the only Black person in the situation. The clerk helping me was Latinx. The manager and the other customer and clerk were white. I stated that I understood that there could be confusion, but that I thought I had a prior claim to the bag. The manager said no, but that she would be glad to see if there was a different bag of a different style, though, that she could offer me. I said no, and attempted to explain that the one in question was perfect for my husband. At that point, the manager said 3 things. Stop raising your voice at me. Stop pointing your finger at me. And I'm leaving you. I'm leaving now because I have done all I can do to help you. I can tell you that the manager's response infuriated me. I felt what some now called oppression rage. The dominance she exerted that was impervious to reason, and her mischaracterizations of my behavior, which she offered in a loud voice that drew the attention of numerous other customers, were humiliating. Were her actions just misguided, just rude, or were they racist? Was she bringing to bear on me the force of white privilege to deny me something that I thought was mine to have and which I was prepared to pay by buying the requisite cologne? What I ask you to note here is that whatever was the manager's mental state, whatever was her conscious intent, whatever her attitude towards me or about race, her actions were appropriative. She exercised the privilege to take what arguably should have been mine. That's what systemic racism does. Takes another's due process, due access, property, and/or advancement opportunities for no rational reason. What happened in the store is a common example of what some call microaggressions and others call discriminatory gestures. I experience the interactions as such, but I will not dwell on my subjective reactions, lest I get into the old style of storytelling by Black people about their experiences in the white world. I've come to think it more appropriate to understand how systemic racism comes to inhabit the mind and actions of its white perpetrators, so many of whom claim I do not have a racist bone in my body. More followed from that episode, which I can share in the discussion later if you wish. Also this afternoon, one of the 3 case examples I will offer can be viewed as an even more blatant example of white privilege. Now, why does the axe resist knowing? I have 4 explanatory propositions to offer as to why the axe resists knowing what the tree remembers. 3, while deeply psychologically profound, come from sources other than psychology or psychoanalysis. The 4th proposition is my own psychological construction. The first proposition I will offer by introducing you to George W. Julian. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold. George W. Julian. He was a white radical abolitionist Republican congressman who vehemently opposed slavery, but recognized the uphill battle against its elimination on the grounds, to quote him from 1853, quote, Americans, meaning whites, emphatically are a Negro-hating people, close quote. James Baldwin, second proposition. This is from his work, Notes of a Native Son, page 101, quote, I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their racial hate so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, that they will be forced to deal with pain, close quote. And thirdly, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, in a speech in London the week before he received the Nobel Peace Prize, said, segregation scars the soul of the segregationist perpetrator as well as the soul of the segregated, close quote. While you ponder these propositions, and before I offer my formulation about the axe not knowing and not remembering, I want to implicate another field in this discussion, namely religion, to just show that probably no field can be exempted from a consideration of systemic racism. I will begin with words from Frederick Douglass. These words are quoted by Noel Ray in his 2018 work, The Great Stain, Witnessing American Slavery. Douglass said, quote, between the Christianity of this land, referencing the colonies, and the Christianity of Christ, I recognize the widest possible difference, so wide that to receive the one as good, pure, and holy is of necessity to reject the other as bad, corrupt, and wicked. To be the friend of the one is of necessity to be the enemy of the other. I love the pure, peaceable, and impartial Christianity of Christ. I therefore hate the corrupt, slave-holding, women-whipping, cradle-plundering, partial, and hypocritical Christianity of this land. Indeed, I can see no reason but the most deceitful one for calling the religion of this land Christianity, close quotes. Of course, there is much literature in support of Douglass's understandable skepticism and rebuke, skepticism about and rebuke of religion. As we know, many, quotes, Christian ministers during slavery countenanced slavery to the extent of torturing the meaning of biblical verses and words to justify enslaving people. The most often cited scriptures subjected to such torturous misrepresentations are Genesis chapter 9, verses 18 through 27, and Paul's epistle to the Ephesians, chapter 6, verses 5 to 7. The details of these reprehensible misuses of the Bible are beyond the scope of this talk, except to say that in the misuse of Paul's epistle, the Latin word servus was intentionally misrepresented by many clergy in the colonial period to mean slave, when actually the meaning had been transformed by 1450 by biblical scholars into a meaning servant, not slave. My point here is that as a people, we are affected by, perhaps even infected with, old, antiquated, hateful ghosts of our country's racial past, which still live within us, are still alive within us. They, like ghosts, inhabit us and at times direct our behaviors, even though our understandings of ourselves will lead quickly after eruptions of the ghosts to pleas such as, "I do not have a racist bone in my body." As the French philosopher Jacques Derrida said in 1994, "The dead can be more alive for us, more powerful, more scary than the living. It is a question of ghosts." One more true fact, even to this day, as is often said, churches on Sunday morning are the most segregated places in America. So much for the first three propositions. The fourth one, this is a la Dorothy Holmes. My own formulation to account for the unknowing and unremembering acts in the hearts, minds, souls, and actions of its wielders, I offer you the following. It is a meteorological reference to the phenomenon of the whiteout. As you know, a whiteout is a condition of diffuse light when no shadows are cast due to a continuous white cloud appearing to merge with the white snow surface. No surface irregularities of the snow are visible, but a dark object may be clearly seen. There's no visible horizon. Everything looks the same. How is this applicable to systemic racism? My answer is that more often than not, society in general seeks to maintain a view of racial whiteness as a diffuse light. Whiteness itself is not to be differentiated. No irregularities in or about it can be observed. Interestingly, in a whiteout, what can be observed are dark objects. As this applies to race, persons of color stand out against the horizon, perhaps like me and my experience at the beauty supply store. The contours of those dark objects are considered mostly in terms of irregularities that are evaluated or even conveniently reconfigured as undesirable. By important contrast, what is irregular within whiteness is not observed. Rather, it is externalized onto the dark objects seen outside oneself. Connecting the meteorological to the societal, whiting out in matters racial condones a persistent and malignant racialized process that involves the actions I experienced at the store. The codes of whiteness, which are derivative from the slave codes, require that blackness remain a stain, always to be kept separate from whiteness so that whiteness can be experienced to be as pure as the driven snow. Wilderson, that's Wilderson, in his 2020 book, Afro-Pessimism, argues this proposition eloquently. There is a long-standing tendency in our country to create whiteout conditions in our considerations of whiteness. Now, what is our hope in moving forward to knowing, remembering, and not repeating destructive axe wielding? I ask you to think of ourselves as mental health professionals as a great liberatory force that our clinical theories and techniques offer our patients. Is it not our calling to face our racial ghosts, to face the hate that Baldwin spoke of, as did Congressman George W. Julian, and as Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said? I ask you to let this be the time to recognize the scars to the heart, minds, and souls of the axe wielders, as well as the harm done to the tree. I call on us to use our self-awareness and our maturity as trained mental health professionals as scaffolding for a truer and fuller self-examination, not just by Black people and others of color, not just by Black people and others of color to explain and justify to whites our worth. Now I say to all of you assembled here today that now is the time to do a deep analysis of your current and ancestral selves, to find your disavowed ghostly racial selves, to claim them, love them as parts of yourself so that you can give them a proper place, or as Freud would say, so that you can find the right psychical weight for them. If you do that work, they can no longer be marauding mischief makers, whether it be at a store in our town, as silence in the consultation room, or even worse, as indifference in the consultation room. I ask these questions not as hypotheticals, but as charges to all of us, and with hope. The hope of Havel, and the hope that I recently heard from Brian Stevenson, the esteemed civil rights activist who has devoted his whole life to redress mass incarceration, and particularly to promote and protect the rights of those on death row. Let us devote just a fraction of our lives, personally and professionally, to eliminate systemic racism and to hope for true racial liberation and equity. Do you dare, do we dare to do so with the hope articulated by Mr. Stevenson? That is, to believe in a thing that is yet to come. Now, that's part one of my talk. Part two, you're getting fresh off the press. I mean, it's actually a pre-release version. So it's like, you know, if you go to see a play in New York, it's not Broadway, but off Broadway. So this is the executive summary for the final report of the Holmes Commission on Racial Equality in American Psychoanalysis. You are the first to hear it. And so here it goes. This is going to be not so poetic. It's narrative, but you know, if you want to take notes even about some of the things I'm going to tell you about findings, please feel free to do. I'm sorry, I don't have a PowerPoint. I'm a Neanderthal still about that kind of thing. So, and you know what an executive summary it is. It's a condensed version of the whole report. The whole report is going to be something like 250 pages. The full report is probably about 125 or so pages. And then there's the so-called technical report that has the survey tables, the interview study report, and other supporting documents. Okay, the Holmes Commission on Racial Equality in American Psychoanalysis, hereafter the Commission, was formed in August 2020. The impetus for its formation came from several years of mounting demand that American psychoanalysis express itself on the importance of psychoanalytic understanding of race. The Commission's eponymous chair, yours truly, Dorothy Holmes, was a leading voice in that plea, first stated by me in a TAP article in 2017. The racial atrocities prevalent in the United States in 2020 became the immediate impetus for the then leadership team of the American Psychoanalytic Association, Bill Glover, president at the time, and Carrie Sulkowitz, president-elect at the time, to consult with the leadership of Black Psychoanalysts Speak, who were Craig Polite and Kathleen Pogue White, on how to address race within APSA. Their discussions led to APSA leadership accepting BPS's, Black Psychoanalyst Speaks, recommendation that a high-level body, a commission, be formed for the psychoanalytic study of systemic racism, and that Dorothy E. Holmes be named its chair. Once formed, 3 co-chairs of the commission were chosen by me in concert with APSA leadership. And those co-chairs are Anton Hart, Dion Powell, and Beverly Stout. The chair and co-chair collaborated to select the full membership of the commission, and then we chose our methodologist, Michael Russell. Selections were made based on clinical and scholarly experience with and commitment to the understanding of race and psychoanalysis, and representation of multiple diversities, level of experience, race and ethnicities other than African American, gender, and sexual orientation, in order that our study of race be informed by multiple aspects of intersectionality. We held our first monthly meeting of the commission on October 6, 2020 to do the following. establish operational guidelines, monthly meetings of the entire commission, each meeting of 2.5 hours, weekly meetings of the leadership team, each at 1 hour, most often with the methodologist present. The practice of beginning each meeting with a roll call and an inspirational message via music or text. The established meeting schedule ran then from October 2020 and will conclude in May of 2023 when we ratify our final report. Two, our second purpose in that initial meeting was to discuss how we would engage each other and the range and scope of our work, which is discussed in the purpose below. We recognize the fruitfulness of conducting our meeting as think tanks, in which we would find our way to purpose and methods by sharing our own stories as commissioners and consultants with systemic racism, personally and professionally. So what was the
Dr.
purpose?
Holmes? I'm
Yes.
sorry. We can't see your face. Okay.
Oh, I don't know what happened. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I didn't mean to disappear or get disappeared.
It's just
Okay, if something goes wrong, just let me know. I'm glad to fix it. Okay, the purpose of the commission was to illuminate to illuminate. If I said illuminate, that's an aspiration I wish I could hold. And it's a slip of the tongue. The purpose of the commission was to illuminate systemic racism in psychoanalysis and to illuminate a path forward to reduce its pernicious effects. We pursued this purpose by studying the influences of race within American psychoanalysis, particularly to evaluate whether, how, and to what degree systemic racism impacts the experience of considering and deciding whether or not to enter the field of psychoanalysis, how it influences teaching and learning in the classroom, supervision, and on the couch, to what extent it is enacted across all domains of psychoanalytic experience, including in career development and advancement, and when enacted, how is it processed and to what extent is it resolved? It is to be noted that we first limited our focus to identifying influences of race within APSA. However, the commission quickly recognized that our volunteer participants, our subjects for our studies, came from a wide array of institutions governed by various bodies, including but not limited to APSA. Thus, we shifted our focus and our title to the Holmes Commission on Racial Equality in American Psychoanalysis, not just in APSA. Okay, so it's important if you're going to study race to have a clear set of conceptualizations about race that guide your study. So here are ours. The commission's work recognized 4 views regarding race. Racialism, which references exposure for all members of a society to ideas and narratives that influence one's thoughts and perceptions about members of racialized groups. 2, racist acts, which are performed by individuals or small groups that reflect prejudice, discrimination, stereotyping, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, particularly a minoritized or otherwise marginalized group. 3, racial enactments, which included how ideas around race and racism unconsciously played out in a group process and interpersonal processes. 4, systemic racism, which is what we're mainly interested in, as a system that produces advantages for some people in a dominant racial group through the oppression of people in a non-dominant racial group. Structural elements of the system are so embedded in individual psyches and institutional practices that they can be ubiquitous and operate outside the conscious awareness of the individual or institution carrying or practicing them. The commission also recognized that how racialized groups are named is controversial and unresolved. Many fields struggle with this issue with the intent to adopt approaches that are not a capitulation to Euro-white normativity. The Commission adopted the convention of using uppercase for African American and Black and lowercase for white, while recognizing that whites and Blacks are racialized groups. I'll tell you, as chair, I argued to have white also capitalized, but you know, it was a democratic process in our commission as much as possible. So I felt fine with the adjustment we made, as I just described, because we understand that the matter of racial naming is evolving. What about our methods of data gathering and analysis? The Commission's project was an evaluative study to determine in what ways and to what degree systemic racism is manifest in psychoanalytic institutions and institutional practices, and to recommend ways to limit negative impact of systematic racism in psychoanalytic institutional practices. It was not a research study to prove or disprove systemic racism. Now, there was again some pushback from the field. It was as if some people thought there must be a way to study race and racism without asking questions about race. Some people thought that because we were asking so many questions about race, that we were predetermining the outcome. A mixed methods design that employed survey instruments and interviews was used to collect data from 3 groups of participants: faculty, staff, and administrators in psychoanalytic institutes or psychoanalytically oriented institutions, candidates associated with training institutes, and professionals who were positioned to enter the field but had not done so. The surveys were developed over an 8-month period using an iterative design process in which major themes to be explored were identified and items for the survey instruments were co-developed by the lead methodologists in collaboration with members of the commission. Then draft instruments were piloted with small sets of potential participants, and revisions were made to improve clarity. The final versions of the survey were administered online using Qualtrics survey software. Survey data was collected in 4 waves. That means, 4 different time periods between September 17 and December 12, 2021. The surveys covered a number of topics, such as the Institute's effort to understand and address race and racism, occurrence and response to racial enactments, curriculum coverage, a variety of topics, admissions practices, support during and following training, etc. For each wave of data collection, institutions and professional organizations provided email addresses of members, and members of each wave were contacted up to 3 times to elicit their participation in the survey. Approximately 7,400 potential participants were invited to participate across the 4 waves. Let's see here. In total, 2,259 responses were received, of which 1,990 were members of the groups of interest. The remaining 269 volunteers were people who identified as psychoanalytically affiliated and wanted to offer information on race, but did not fall into one of the 3 participation groups. These folks were offered the opportunity to do so, to participate via a post-survey questionnaire, and thereby contribute to what we called our field data, which I mentioned more below. Analyses of survey responses were conducted separately for each group of participants and were examined both collectively for all respondents and separately for people who identify as BIPOC or as white. Small group interviews were also conducted to probe more deeply into specific topics. All interviewers participated in a 1-hour training and used a semi-structured protocol to guide interviews. The sample of interview participants was selected based first on a survey item that asked whether they would be willing to participate in an interview. Of the approximately 600 people who expressed willingness, 80 faculty members, 70 candidates, and 20 people who could have entered training but didn't. Of those numbers, 78 faculty members actually participated, 63 candidates, and 19 qualified to enter psychoanalytic training answered the response for participation in the interviews. To obtain a diverse range of views when selecting participants, first priority was given to people who identified as BIPOC. Second priority was given to people who indicated on the survey that they did not believe racism was an issue in their institute. And third priority was given to people who identified as white and indicated some level of concern about racism. All interviews were conducted via Zoom and were video recorded. Following the completion of the interviews, the interviewer used a report template to provide a written summary of each theme addressed in the interviews. Together, the summary reports and review of the recordings were used to inform a 29-page interview report that appears in the technical report of our final report. Please note that participants in the survey study in some of the items were given space to express a position that racism did not exist, occur, or operate within the field of psychoanalysis. We also specifically invited people who did express that position to participate in the interviews in which they again were able to express these views. Data from the field forms the third source of data. So we have the surveys, the interviews, and data from the field. What is data from the field? It includes a variety of information provided through personal experiences of the commissioners, communications on the listservs of our various organizations, professional publications, and conference presentations. A fourth source of data was the commission process itself, in which the commission engaged for over 2 years, in which the study was designed, conducted, analyzed, and reflected upon to inform the main findings and recommendations. Together, findings from the survey data, analyses, the interviews, the field, and the commission work itself inform the key findings from the study, which I'm about to share with you now. So, findings from the analyses of the survey, interview, field data, and the commission's own process clustered into 5 themes, and that's how I will present to you. The themes and the principal findings for each theme are given below. So the first theme is understanding and addressing racism. What did we find out about it? Psychoanalytic faculty and candidate members of psychoanalytic institutions experience an inadequate institutional response to issues of race, racism, and white supremacy when they arise. Candidates experience this lack more than faculty, and BIPOC experience this paucity the most, including in supervision. Both faculty and candidates feel personally inadequate to address issues of race, racism, and white supremacy. BIPOC members of psychoanalytic institutions feel the most vulnerable about racial issues in their institutional lives. For example, that whites have advantages in institute life that they do not have, and that these advantages are enhanced by higher degree status, such as having a doctoral degree. BIPOC members experience little proactive effort by their institutions to understand and address issues of race. Psychoanalytic training, recruitment through mentoring, that was our second theme. Currently, recruitment relies too heavily on word of mouth. The lack of vigorous and broad recruitment outreach favors the continuance of a predominantly white membership in psychoanalytic institutions. BIPOC applicants experience the processes of admission as significantly less comfortable and positive than white applicants. Regarding progression, even when there are objective criteria and data for progression, they are not reliably utilized without recognition that subjective assessments are necessarily impacted by white supremacy. White faculty and candidates significantly more than BIPOC reported that their institutions offered mentorship, support, and opportunities for professional connection. White candidates and faculty compared to BIPOC candidates underestimated the negative impact of structural barriers, such as rigidities in curricula, financial costs, and accessibility to training sites, on BIPOC candidates being able to complete their training. The third theme was education. The curriculum, racism as an analytic lens, and supervision were some of the subtopics under education. Faculty and candidates, irrespective of their race, agree that psychoanalytic curricula do not adequately address race and racism, including that BIPOC subjects and authors are not adequately represented. Candidates are not adequately trained to apply racial awareness to analysis. Though freedom to choose supervisors was widely reported, it was acknowledged by a significant minority of candidates that race and ethnicity should be considered in selecting supervisors. A majority of candidates and faculty reported inadequate discussion of race and racism in supervision. Curricular representation of race is typically token, as in one course, a class, or an optional secondary offering, creating undue and unmetabolized pressures, sometimes with explosive and destructive results for candidates and instructors in those singular, isolated, or siloed offerings. Candidates perceive themselves to be more comfortable than instructors in discussing race. This perception is more pronounced among BIPOC candidates. Faculty and APSA institutes report being less comfortable in discussing race than faculty in independent institutes. BIPOC faculty and candidates are more likely to raise issues of race and racism, and with more understanding than their white counterparts, even when adverse reactions may occur, such as unworked through enactments. Now, the fourth theme is enactments. Racist enactments were reported to be ubiquitous. The vast majority of racial enactments happen in public, that is, classrooms, online forums, community events, and committees. Despite the thorniness of dealing with racial enactments, a strong desire for change was expressed. Fear of retaliation for addressing race is intense and widespread. BIPOC and white candidates were wary of being seduced into carrying the lion's share of the work to be done on race, only to be too often tokenized, pathologized, and problematized in doing so, or conversely, dismissed or erased. White faculty and candidates were fearful of showing racism or ignorance. These strong subjective states among BIPOC and whites can lead to superficial and ineffectual engagement of race and racism, and even stasis. The commission itself experienced, recognized, and processed its own enactments. The commission enactments were inevitable, given that all of the commissioners were born into a structurally racist society, though in radically different and asymmetric ways. While carrying various affects and defenses about its enactments, including anger, disappointment, denial, and withdrawal, collectively over time and multiple instances, the commission embraced its own racist enactments as rich opportunity for working through by doing in-depth process work. I will say here, when we started, we thought we would finish our work in a year and a half. One of the major reasons it's taken this long is the process work we were doing as a commission ourselves. In that work, subject to racial enactments, the commission at times scattered. I don't mean we didn't hold our meetings. I mean that within our meetings, there was a kind of scattering and breakdown, and then reformed as a generative collective, enabling us to complete our work and to write about and publish a paper on the value of process work for the holding of and reduction in inevitable racist enactments. And that is published in the first issue of this year's TAP, APSIS magazine. The final theme is race on the couch. Some of the findings in this section are more inferential, more speculative, because the analytic dyad is such a private space and because the survey of this study did not address this matter as fully as it did the other themes. However, what is reported is gathered from the field data and clinical examples and reflections from scholars on race, both Black and white. Majority of faculty, including but not limited to training or personal analysts, reported that they had no preparation to apply racial awareness to the psychoanalytic work they did. African American and white candidates valued their own analyses as the most important part of their training, but BIPOC candidates did so significantly less often. Analysts may tend to reinterpret experiences with racism as something else, e.g., if a candidate presents something to his analyst about having had a racist experience with a colleague or with a fellow candidate, it might get interpreted as really being about sibling rivalry, not race. African or birth order issues. African American, and by the way, of course, it could be both. But the point of what the subjects were reporting is that they felt that often the analysts would interpret away from anything that was racial as itself being of primary importance. African American graduate analysts may feel that they are not considered by the powers that be to be suitable or desirable to become training analysts. There is a persistent view that BIPOC psychoanalytic patients don't exist, even in large racially diverse metropolitan areas. Those in powerful positions as policy setters and educators are perceived to block inclusion in the core curriculum of topics such as race, racism, and white supremacy. BIPOC analysans may search for similarity of racialized suffering in choosing an analyst, thinking this will facilitate analysis of race. The possibility that the selected analyst may not be prepared for such work on the basis of denial or their own racial heritage may not be recognized. Finally, recognition of the centrality of systemic racism within the United States and psychoanalytic institutions may be defended against by pointing to outreach to supervisees and analysans in other far-off places such as East Asia, while at the same time there are no or a paucity of BIPOC candidates and faculty from the United States. Recommendations. Within the body of this final report and at the full report's end, recommendations are offered at the granular level and then in an overarching section on how to understand systemic racism, recruitment through advancement after graduation, educational components, how to work with inevitable racial enactments, and race on the couch. My final remarks in the executive summary focus on recommendations for leadership. Local and national leaders in psychoanalysis must unequivocally acknowledge the presence and deleterious effects of systemic racism in psychoanalytic institutions to help allay the massive resistance to grasping and working to resolve systemic racism within psychoanalysis. Local and national leaders in psychoanalysis must strongly support meaningful initiatives to address and remediate systemic racism in psychoanalytic institutions. Leaders must develop meaningful and comprehensive strategies to combat systemic racism at multiple administrative levels, including vision, mission, and core value statements, policies, and procedures, with means for regular monitoring and remediation of expressions of systemic racism at all levels of institutional life, e.g. classes, supervisions, curriculum, committees, and boards, and in the consultation room. Local and national leaders should obtain regular consultation from experts in racial equity and other aspects of intersectionality to increase the likelihood of their success in their efforts to enhance racial and other equities. Such leaders should also form or join collective frameworks, that is, for example, across various institutes, or let's say regionally, collective frameworks for support and to solidify their resolve to stay the long course required to achieve racial and other equities. My final note: when I started my long investment in psychoanalysis as a first-year candidate at the then Baltimore Washington Institute for Psychoanalysis in 1977, I was painfully aware of one aspect, not race so much. It was there, but the thing that hit me in the face as an exclusionary tendency of psychoanalysis was the then waiver requirement for all applicants other than physicians. While couched as a matter of standards on the receiving end, that is me on the receiving end of the requirement, it was a matter of systemic exclusion based on my discipline. At best, an unacknowledged guild protection, and at worst, another ism unrecognized as such. Even with the very sour note of the waiver provision, a disingenuous obfuscation of a systemic problem, at my beginning in psychoanalysis, I found, and now I still find, psychoanalysis something to celebrate. For me and so many others of all diversities, it has at its core liberatory and radical clinical theories and techniques that are designed very well to help free people from their suffering. As analysts, we upset the status quo and provide a treatment experience that will make it possible for people to progress, to soar, to become their authentic selves, to love, to work, to play. The work of the Holmes Commission has been to study an unfortunate impediment to the full expression of the psychoanalytic aspirations just described. That impediment is systemic racism. It is a very proud and appreciative moment for me in the sunset of my career to have worked with my fellow co-leaders on the commission, all of the commissioners, our immediate support staff, our consultants, APSA that gave the commission its auspices on recommendation of Black Psychoanalysts Speak, the participants in the study, and those awaiting our findings and recommendations. I fervently hope that our final report will help psychoanalysis to free itself from its attachment to systemic racism that has grievously hurt so many. It hurts our country as it has from its beginning. It hurts all of us individually who have its influences coursing through us, and has hurt and currently is hurting our national psychoanalytic organizations. Now is the time to use all our tools, including the findings and recommendations of this study, to free ourselves and our patients as much as we can from systemic racism and other oppressions. For those oppressions diminish us, not just in our daily lives, but in our psyches. If we embrace this important fact fully and work to limit its harm, we will become more truly psychoanalytic than we ever have been. Thank you.
Just going to jump in while Jerry's
Thank-
unmuted. Well,
thank you.
Go ahead, Jerry. Go ahead. Take it away.
Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Holmes, for that wonderful presentation and helping us understand what you're trying to convey in the work that you've done. This is a time where we could take questions and have a discussion of the materials. If anybody would like to, you could either raise your hand or write something in the chat. If you don't know how to raise your hand on Zoom, you can go into, it's under in the bottom of your screen. You hit reactions and you can raise your hand electronically. I don't see you.
You can wave your real hands and we'll try to see you too.
Yes, but we need your camera on in order for that.
Right.
Logan has his hand up.
Okay, I just, Logan. Go ahead, Logan. We need to have you unmuted.
Thank you. Dr. Holmes, thank you so much for coming at this point in our community's life, in the world's life, in our country's life to share your findings, share your process, and offer some guidance about the work as you so wonderfully framed it in terms of like the personal work, the professional work, the community work to address this. You know, this is the Gibbard lecture. It's one of the major lectures of our Grand Round cycle, which is focused on psychoanalysis and psychoanalytic thinking. And I appreciate that the commission's work was focused on training within analytic institutes, but I could imagine some folks might say, well, that's great that the analysts are thinking about this, but that doesn't apply to us. We're not that. We don't, it's different. So it's a bit of a wondering and curiosity, but to what extent do you imagine that your findings and your recommendations apply to training institutes such as our training programs here at this hospital, this medical school, or other institutes, other groups of learning and practicing and living and dancing and soaring, as you named it, outside of the psychoanalytic sphere?
Well, your question is an easy one to address in the sense that there is a phenomenon called not meism. You know, oh, that's, you know, analysts who, you know, are always interested in these deep things and consciousness. We don't deal with that. We don't have to worry about that. I can just say, you know, I've worked in all kinds of settings and I've not found any of them free of this. I did my postdoc at the University of Rochester, New York, when it was in its heyday as a psychoanalytically oriented place, but it wasn't a psychoanalytic institute. It was a department of psychiatry headed by the very, very brilliant John Romano. Maybe some are old enough to remember who he was. And he was brilliant. Nobody missed grand rounds, not because you were afraid or intimidated, but because his formulations were amazing. He was very Romanesque, you know, tall, handsome. He looked the part of who he was, and he played the part beautifully most of the time. But an example I'll give you, I'll try to be as brief as I can. It was a case of a clergyman who was in the house, in hospital, for an episode, a manic episode. And he had them periodically, and he was particularly stressed by his wife's chronic illness, physical illness. And whenever she had one of her crises, it seemed to be followed surely by him having a manic episode. And common to those manic episodes, he would have affairs. You know, so true to the form, he had an affair. But this time it was with a woman of color. This is a white clergyman. And Dr. Romano, in his formulation, raised that issue to the cause of the manic episode, when clearly it was not the cause. He had many, many episodes, and none of them before had been involving a Black woman. So I was very disappointed with that, and how upset and fervent he was that that was the cause of this man falling apart, because he dared to bed a Black woman. He also called her a negress, which was a term of derision. So, as how this applies to institutional practice, and some of what we found in the Holmes Commission study, I went to several of my very admired supervisors, and many of whom were tenured professors or tenured associate professors. And I said, is there anything we can do about this? If one of you talk to Dr. Romano, this is not right. Nobody would do it. So I went to see him. I made an appointment and went to see him. And I'm so proud, by the way, of young people today, because young people today are stepping up. They're just not going to be continuing to put up with this. And I was very respectful, of course. And I said, you're so interested in ideas, and you cultivate in us, high-level thought process. So I just want to talk with you, Dr. Romano, about, how you raised a correlation to a cause. He asked me what I meant, and I told him. And then I said, it's considered improper now to refer to people of color, or, if you called a Jewish woman a Jewess, or a Native American woman a squaw. I mean, these are hurtful terms. In those days, people still smoked in their offices. He smoked cigars. He puffed on his cigar. He said, Dr. Evans, I was not married at the time. He said, Dr. Evans, I grew up in Milwaukee, and that's what I learned to call, I don't know, I don't want to mischaracterize. That's what I learned to call them. I don't think I'm going to change. And I said, well, I wouldn't be so presumptuous as to think you would change, but I did want you to know how I'm thinking about what you said. And then he did something that, and then he said, well, I've been meaning to talk to you anyway, to have you come into the office. I'd like to offer you a job as an assistant professor when you finish your postdoc. And I said, well, that's certainly very good news as I'm beginning to search for positions. I said, however, I haven't talked to my division chief yet. I'll have to get back to you. Thank you. But I felt it was kind of a seductive arrangement, that we should just move on from this tough subject and all will be well. I didn't stay in Rochester. It wasn't because of that, because that's everywhere. Frankly, I didn't like the snow from the beginning of September through April. That was as much a reason as anything. So that's my example of how it's ubiquitous. And so, as wonderful as you people are, yeah, I'm sure it's in your midst. Not because you're bad, not because, and I've gone long time ago, I lost my interest in deciding whether a given person is racist. I'm more interested in how the system of racism can catch any one of us in its grip. And I think the groups would have better discussions if they could humbly recognize that and not get in fights about who is and isn't a racist.
Mhm.
I hope I addressed your question, Logan.
Thank you very much. Yes.
And I noticed we have another hand up. We have some limited time, and hopefully we'll be able to have time for this, for the question. Yasmin Basnet.
Hi, so my name is Jasmine Bazanet Phillips, and I'm a M3. So I'm in my psychiatry rotation. I'm in medical school. So I just had a question. You talked about the patient experience where in psychoanalysis, Black patients are or BIPOC patients are often bringing up issues of racism that they've experienced or instances of racism that they've experienced, and the person who's helping them with their treatment has kind of redirected the conversation as it relates to other kind of issues they might be experiencing. As you said, like sibling rivalry, kind of grappling with birth order. So I'm guessing my question, like more specifically, is how do you suggest working with patients to unpack racism they've experienced? And do you have any techniques which you've found liberating for patients in your practice?
Well, first of all, I'm kind of one of those old-fashioned analysts, you know, surface before depth, ego before id. Some of that it translates is to always, in that sense, validate what the patient is telling you. Start with what the patient is telling you. The quickness to, even if it weren't about race, the quickness to change one thing to another probably involves some kind of defensive process on the part of the therapist. When someone says something that is very racially loaded, like if they use the N-word, or even short of that, a white patient of mine recently was very angry at a man she had encountered in a community meeting, and she referred to his Jewishness, which was on the surface not really relevant to the, you know. And so I said to her, I noticed that for some reason the man's Jewishness was important to you. Could you say more about that? What made it important to reference his Jewishness? In other words, I don't say, why did you do that? Because, you know, obviously the patient would feel reproached, or there would be more likelihood that the patient would feel reproached. But I have found when people do use the racial labels, they're often packed with affect. And my interest is to unpack the affect. You know, I noticed there was a certain intensity. You referred to his Jewishness, and you were rather intense in doing so. I'm thinking there's a lot there. Could you say more of what the meaning of that was for you? So, you know, my point is stay with it. You know, you've got, if it has other additional meanings, you'll get there. And in today's world, it's not so much, you know, awareness about therapy per se, but I think young people are very onto, and informed people in general are very onto therapists who try to disappear these issues or erase them or quickly translate them into something else. And one of the people interviewed in our study, who is a senior analyst of color, but never, and works very hard in their institute, but never sat for training analyst or, and felt very downed in his experience in his own institute, even though he stayed with it on these issues. That there just was no room, you know, in effect, in a way, no room for him as to fully express, and I would say consolidate himself as a Black man. Just wasn't, you know, the attitude was, that's not what this is really about. It's always a defense against something else. And that's just antiquated. You know? So let's have yes and, not either or.
We need to.
I see, I'm sorry, just a minute. I see something here that says that the workshop, is that referencing this, the one I'm in? I thought it was 1:30 to 3. Is it 1 to 3? 1 to 3.
Yes, it's 1 to
okay.
3.
Okay, I'm glad I realized that.
Okay. Yeah, So we're coming to the end of our time here. Is that what you were going to announce?
Yeah, we're over time, so we can go
Okay.
ahead and wrap up the info you need to tell people.
Oh, okay. So if you just take a look at the chat, there's for those of you who would like to attend the afternoon portion of this lecture, you can follow that link if you have not registered already. And if you have registered, you will have a link to attend the afternoon in your email confirmation. But we would like to thank you, Dr. Holmes, for this morning lecture. And we can conclude unless there's more, Julie.
No, almost at thanks again, Dr. Holmes. We appreciate your expertise and your discussion, and we'll see you in the afternoon.
I'll be here. Bye-bye.
Thank you.